Trump is heading to the hoosgow. That's right. We're back with Command Briefing. It's Jared A. Chambers. And it is Thursday, August the 24th. So we're coming in a little past the 8 o'clock hour tonight for the live listeners. I did not know that Trump would make his appearance in Fulton County quite so late today, yesterday. If I had known earlier, I might have scheduled things differently. I don't know if and when he might be coming out with a statement. He was coming in, just before the top of the hour here. So I don't know how long the whole processing will take. Might have been interesting to analyze any statement that Trump has after this and what he does with the moment. Because Trump is not one to waste a moment. And speaking of moments, there have been plenty in the last 24 hours. Trump, before making his appearance in Georgia yesterday evening, appeared on a very well-viewed video with Tucker Carlson, about 45 minutes there or so, interviewing with Tucker Carlson, run just in time to compete with the GOP debate on Fox News last night, done intentionally, of course. Both men, I think, relished rubbing it in on Fox News, as well they should have. Nothing going on at Fox News was particularly relevant. So I'm going to do what a lot of people in podcasting or broadcasting would not do. I am going to lead you with the end result of all of this. You can listen to me for the next 60 seconds here, and you will know everything that you need to know. And if it satisfies you, you can walk away from this episode of Command Briefing. I'm going to begin with the whole story. And then you can decide if you want to back into the reasoning of it. Nothing changed last night. Trump is about 40 plus points ahead, depending on who you listen to, averaging it out about 40 plus points ahead. DeSantis is in a distant second place, which has been at risk across at least the last 4 weeks now in the betting markets, and also some individual and state polls showing Ramaswamy coming on strong and in some places displacing him for second place. And that's what happened again last night. Trump is still about 40 points ahead, will remain so. DeSantis did not destroy his base, but his base is ever shrinking. And Ramaswamy is still coming on strong and will continue to threaten DeSantis for that second place spot. Probably didn't fell him in one swoop with last night, but will certainly keep that momentum going where it may be inevitable that DeSantis falls out of second place. But as of last night, nothing has changed. So I'm telling you that because I want to be the one honest guy out there telling you that and not spinning it for all that it's worth. And that has essentially been my day. It is very, very hot in Georgia. We are having the dog days of summer. The weather is atrociously hot. It is miserable to do anything outside. And it was very easy today to just keeping up with the movements of Trump as far as traveling to Georgia and reading other accounts of the debate and Tucker Carlson's interview. It was easy to get sucked into that today. And I've talked about how you can tell when the DeSantis have a really bad day or a bad weekend. You start getting these trolls filling up your mentions, and they are just cranky. They are in a very, very bad mood. Here's how bad of a mood they're in. Chris Lash, if you don't know who that is Dana Lash's wife. I call Chris Lash Dana Lash's wife, mockingly, of course. Dana Lash was one of the National Review Against Trump Never Trumpers. She has retained that place. Dana Lash, of course, is well known as having been a former face of the NRA in a lot of its public campaigns. Dana Lash is a fairly attractive and well-spoken woman and did an adequate job speaking for gun rights. But I don't think that she is particularly special or talented in any other respect, and she has certainly been pretty consistently anti-Trump. Now, I have had conversations with people over time. One of the neat things about Twitter over the years has been getting to know some people, and you get a little bit of inside baseball along the way and have conversations. And it is kind of a known factor at some of these events that Chris Lash is definitely in second place behind his wife. She is the one wearing the pants, so to speak. She's the one leading the charge at whatever event that they're at. So there's Chris, walking a few feet behind his wife. In some cases, I have been told, carrying her purse, because he's basically there as support crew. But Chris, he likes to get really mouthy on Twitter, while, like many of these guys, they speak this, faux veneer Christianity. And don't get me wrong, I have nothing against Christianity. The world could use a whole lot more of it. But I don't like people who wear it on their sleeves to excuse bad behavior, i.e. I'm forgiven. And if I, come across as a complete jerk, well, I'm just a sinner. What can I say? Please, Jesus, forgive me. So you get a lot of that from Chris. But what I can't abide a liar. Now, coming out of a debate, there is a lot of spin. In fact, with the debate, you have the so-called spin room, where you have representatives of the individual campaigns giving their take. And you'll be shocked by this, I know. Everybody thinks their guy won. Everybody thinks that. Which is fine. If Chris Lash wants to think that DeSantis won, more power to him. What I can't stand is somebody who lies, and Chris Lash lied, and he said that last night changed the polling, and it changed the betting markets, and that DeSantis was now ahead in those, and that anyone saying otherwise was presenting false information to mislead people. And as far as feedback, we have several mechanisms for this. First of all, during the debate, different folks run focus groups. CNN ran a focus group. Fox, of course, as the host, they ran a focus group. Then you have the polling that comes out, and the polling firms are eager to poll all this. And then you have the actual betting markets where people are putting money into their point of view and what happened. Now, in terms of the polling, it's like all polling. It's not all exactly in agreement, but you can see some trend lines with it. Again, DeSantis did not destroy his base of support. It's still there. However, at least one poll that came out showed both Trump and Ramaswamy ahead of DeSantis as far as who won the debate. In other words, Trump was the winner in the minds of at least some simply for not being there. And that's a point of view to which I can heartily subscribe. The only winning move is not to play. From that movie, long ago. Strange game. The only winning move is not to play. And Trump did not play, leaving the rest of them there. Now, again, these numbers were not wildly divergent, but it is worth noting, too. Even for Ramaswamy to be in the same league with DeSantis, remember, DeSantis is supposed to be the Trump killer. He's supposed to be the second place guy who can easily now catapult into first place at any moment. And as I have said on this program repeatedly, he is now competing with the JV team completely. Trump shouldn't even be on his radar because he is in trouble given the amount of money and backing that has been put into his campaign. And for somebody like Ramaswamy, an upstart, to even be within points of DeSantis, much less ahead, it's a freaking big deal, folks. That is not a small thing. And a lot of people know that Ramaswamy is well-spoken, and so he was receiving a fair amount of heat out there. If anything, the heat that he was getting was saving DeSantis. DeSantis otherwise might have been the focal point for other people in attacking. If anything, people have said that Ramaswamy is this, Trump shill who's been put in there to hurt DeSantis. I could argue that based on the strength of his running, he could just as easily be a DeSantis shill put in the race to take the heat off DeSantis. Knowing that you don't have Trump showing up to these debates to play with the JV team, here is Ramaswamy representing the sort of Trumpian contingent out there and taking the slings and the barbs from the neocons and getting the tough questions that they all wanted to ask Trump and kind of leaving DeSantis alone somewhat. He benefits from that. You're crazy if you think that he doesn't. But yet, he had, again, for his supporters, and he has a base. It is shrinking. It is suffering from attrition. But it is a base of support that he has, based largely in hopes and dreams. But they do refuse to see what we saw, the awkward look on his face, the canned remarks. And we have, people like Chris Lash saying, hey, this is the guy who really won. Ramaswamy didn't. The betting markets and the polls show it. And it is a lie. It is a lie. No, it was a long way to get there, but you had to have the background to understand that is a bald-faced lie that there's any kind of consensus in the betting markets or otherwise that DeSantis had a really strong night and changed the trajectory of the race. So I called Chris Lash a liar, and I posted receipts. I went right to the Predicted website. It's there. Copy, paste, boom. You're a liar. Stop lying, you purse-toting pansy. didn't mind saying it, because if you're going to be that bold to get on social media and publicly lie to your followers, you should take some heat. And I delivered the heat. And Chris Lash wants to fight me. Said that, that he hopes that I get a chance to say that to his face one day. Tough guy. All I can say is, and what I did say is, he is a liar and he is a coward, and I am a public person. My name is Jared A. Chambers. I live in Georgia. You can find me. It ain't hard to do. And if you want to play internet tough guy because you got your fifis hurt that I called you out on your lie, you are welcome to do anything that you want to do about it. But we both know you ain't gonna. We're gonna take a break, and we'll be right back. All right, we're coming back in. Thank you, everyone, for listening this evening. Let's talk a little bit more about last night. I'm going to start with the debate first because there's really less that I want to say about it at this point. As I said, Vivek Ramaswamy, most people feel like he had a decently strong night. It is because he is in touch with what a lot of the voters actually think. These are Trumpian positions. Now, I don't know, speaking for myself and nobody else, I don't know that I trust the guy. He's young. He, goes to a good school, gets in the business world. I can't really explain to you what his business actually did or delivered or succeeded at. I mean, it's not something, it's not like a consumer product or something, that we all are familiar with and buy. So I don't know that his record in business is that strong or anything, but he ends up writing this book, Woke Inc., about all of the left-leaning ideology infecting the corporate America workspace. And this is a topic that's very much on people's minds. It's been on my mind. We've talked about it here with the COVID restrictions and also the fact in designing your escape plan, if you're dependent on a paycheck from corporate America, it is very hard for you to buck the system and resist. You get addicted to the paycheck and they have certain expectations. And so what he wrote about spoke to a lot of people. At the same time, there's really no long-term record that you can look at with the guy as far as his thoughts and convictions. There is a little bit of confusion on what he really thinks about January 6th and Trump and Pence and all of those things. There seems to be some shifting positions there. Sometimes people do change their mind. So I can't say that he's not sincere. I'm just saying, as of today, I don't necessarily want to put all of my trust into him, because what you say today is not enough for me. But even if you think that he is an out and out liar, that he is there as a shill for Trump, or even as I suggested a moment ago, a shill for DeSantis to take the heat off of him, here is what you absolutely cannot deny. What he says connects with people because it is what they have been clearly demanding of their elected officials and getting disappointed on for years and years and years. And Ramaswamy does the basic sales 101 thing, which is understand his target market, the competition and what they're offering, and then he develops messaging and a value proposition that is customer-centric, that speaks to the pain points that they have, what they have expressed, what they want. And he knows, too, in making that pitch that you're going to get objections, and he anticipates those objections and actually has answers ready for those objections. Sales 101 stuff. I mean, this is my world now. This is something that I can relate to and look at and say, okay, he's objectively doing a good job. And guess what? Anybody else up there could have done the same thing. So why is it that they wear their obstinance as a badge of honor when they talk about Ukraine and the money that they're going to send? And they talk about everything except the issues that you care about. When they sit there and drone on about things like climate change in a Republican debate, as you can't afford to buy groceries or gas. And then they talk about sending your tax dollars to Ukraine and why that's important. And if you boo them, well, that's your problem. And they all sanctimoniously signed this pledge that Trump wisely refused to sign because he knew you can't make pledges with dishonest people. It only ties your hands when you make a promise, make a pact with dishonest people. But they all derided him for not signing the loyalty pledge, which says that any of them up there swears that they will support the eventual nominee. And they had to put it to a show of hands, which is kind of silly, but then again, this is kind of a silly show at this point. And they all did not raise their hands that they would support President Trump if he is the eventual nominee in the instance that one of these kangaroo courts delivers a conviction. And we all know, by the way, that they are kangaroo courts, and any Republican who can't say that doesn't deserve to be on that stage. Again, you are not in tune with what your customers want. And so some outright refused to raise their hand, Christie being one of them. Again, you should be barred from any future debate. You signed a pledge, and then on stage you went against the pledge that you signed. Christie should be out of this now. If we were going to follow the rules, which of course we're not talking about Trump, so we're not going to follow the rules. Everyone knows this. But DeSantis actually had to look around to decide which way he was going to go. You can give Chris Christie some credit. At least he lied with a straight face. Yeah, I signed your pledge, but F you, I ain't voting for him. DeSantis literally had to look to his left and look to his right and see there were a preponderance of hands going up, and then slowly and half-heartedly put his sort of up. I mean, this is... You've probably seen something like this happen in high school, probably being the last occasion. Show of hands, everybody. And then the one meek person, who never wants to take a stand, waits to see what everyone else votes first by show of hands. Pretty pathetic, but again, any of them could have prepped for this. Any of them should have expected that question to come. You were an idiot if you didn't. And so why did you not have a decisive answer and an explanation for it walking into that debate stage? If a 38-year-old business guy can do it, so could you if you cared, but you think that you're better than the people voting for you. You think that they don't have a choice but to vote for you. And so you have gotten very used to not responding directly to their concerns. And it is pathetic. And you have created a lane for this guy to come in, maybe as a Trojan horse, maybe as somebody that's bad for everybody. Bad for Trump, bad for DeSantis, bad for the party. I don't know. Frankly, no one knows. He's too new for people to be as certain as everyone seems to be about what they think of the guy. But it is only the intransigence of the GOP that allows that to be the case, that opens up a lane for anybody who shows basic responsiveness to what the GOP's voters have been saying for years that they want. And so you should be mad at your candidate, whether you're more of a Tim Scott or a Nikki Haley kind of person, or you're that loyal DeSantis, Florida, got a gator in your profile on social media person. Be mad at your guy for just not having the foresight to be able to answer basic questions that any fool could have expected to be asked. And one thing that we know, and again, this, if anything, this was a pretty stacked audience. This is not, they didn't go pull people out of a MAGA rally and pull them into this debate. Everyone knew that the Trump focus was going to be off that debate stage. So I'm sure there were some Trumpian people there. But I'm also sure that's not the entirety of what was there. And if it is not clear by now, we are tired of throwing money at Ukraine. And there's a picture, it's been going around on social media. I've used it to highlight this podcast tonight, where you can upload a picture with each podcast. It is Nikki Haley looking like the teacher who has lost total control of the classroom to class clown Ramaswamy, who has both hands up in peace signs. She's standing there at the lectern, looks so mad. And if she is the school teacher who's lost control, then Christie is the buffoonish fat principal who lectures to people, but everyone knows life hasn't exactly gone his way either. These people, the students, they're not looking up to him. As sanctimonious and lecturing as he is, he simply does not have the respect of the people in the room because he is a clown and he looks like a clown. And so Ramaswamy does stronger than expected. Now, I said, and I stand by, it does not change the overall trajectory of the race in one night. What it does cement is there has been a shift. There is ongoing momentum towards Ramaswamy that is peeling away from people like DeSantis, people looking for other options who maybe aren't sold on Trump but did like Trump policies. And so, understanding that things aren't static, they're dynamic, and that things were already in flux, in movement. What didn't change last night is the movement towards Ramaswamy and away from DeSantis that will, I think, continue into the fall months here. And it's a big deal because this guy doesn't have wide name recognition. He doesn't have the backing and the funding that other people have access to. Even Nikki Haley running much further back, still has that neocon backing and access to GOP establishment networks and money. And even if you don't think that Ramaswamy had a runaway win on that stage, the fact that he held his own and created buzz and momentum to where a plurality of that audience and people watching at home feel like he got the best of the evening, that matters, and it will continue to matter. Where he goes with it, probably not much higher than that distant second that second place is destined to be. But it could be 99 real soon for Ron. All right, we'll take a break and we'll come back and let's talk a little bit about the Trump interview. Stay with me. Welcome back into the bottom half of Command Briefing. And we'll give a shout out there listening live, my friends over at Ozfest. The mighty Human Z, who has been on this show before, and we've talked to, leaves a comment. DeSantis is in free fall, and Vivek just stole the stage from Ron. Had DeSantis not run his mouth so much, it may have even helped him. I like your Trumpian contingent theory about Vivek. Nice thinking. Yeah, sometimes it's just a matter of, let's think outside the box a little bit and who benefited. And maybe he's not a shill for anybody, but if you're, going down logical theories, Ron had a better night that people were less focused on his awkwardness. And the awkwardness kind of shows more in the videos, the sound clips a bit, because he always sounds weird. But the facial expressions and how awkward and unnatural it is. You just have to look at some of it. Go watch. People, believe me, have caught notice of the facial expressions and have done some very good videos pulling close-ups of that. However, I did not watch any of that live. I was watching the Trump conversation with Tucker Carlson, which at this point in time, one of the most viewed videos ever, and maybe it was the most viewed video on the former Twitter, the new X ever, was when Tucker Carlson himself emerged out of exile from Fox News and dropped his first video on the platform. And that video acquired something like 120 million views fairly quickly. And I think I talked about it on maybe Twitter / X at the time, because there's always the naysayer crowd. And if you want to knock somebody, it's easy to do because I have a marketing background, right? I understand digital marketing and social media marketing. This is part of my professional background. I understand, and I'm going to tell you right now, and I'm going to explain this, so don't, hang me, string me up for this. I get that 120 million views isn't the same thing as getting 120 million people watching a television show through like Nielsen ratings, which, 120 million people don't really watch anything. I mean, things that the nation as a whole watches together in large, massive numbers, things like presidential speeches, Super Bowls, things like that. I mean, if you get 30, 40, 45 million people watching any one thing at one time, that's a huge deal in terms of television numbers. And so I'm not telling you that social media videos are getting literally 4 or 5 times what high-rated nationwide TV programs are getting. I'm not making a direct head-to-head comparison, nor am I making a direct head-to-head comparison. Now, this Trump interview has some 200 million plus views so far, far surpassing Tucker's initial launch on the platform now. So these are record-setting numbers. I'm not telling you that means that 200 million people huddled around their phone screens or computer desktops and watch that interview front to back. What I can tell you, though, is there's still meaningful things that we can extrapolate from this. And yes, these are massive numbers that do at least parallel old media. So what do we mean by that? So with social media, there are particular things that you have to constitute a so-called view on the platform. And I don't know exactly what the current X algorithm is and how they're measuring things and presenting it to their advertisers, because let's face it, the advertisers are their customers. And it's those kind of metrics that Twitter or X uses to sell to advertisers. Like, look at the engagement our people get on the platform. Think of the reach that your advertisers would get mixed in amongst it. If they overinflated that number in the way that some people suggest, they would get no advertisers because everyone would know that it was BS. And there's this suggestion out there, 200 million. Well, anybody that scrolls past it on their timeline, that's a view. Well, no, that's not how it works. You do have to show some kind of intent to view the video for it to measure as a view. And that typically has been, there's a percentage of the frame that has to show up within your view screen that you're watching on. Meaning if you're, if it's halfway out of your view screen because you're scrolling, that's not a view. It has to be there, most of it in full view of you within your frame of view, the view screen. And it has to be there for a period of time that shows that you stopped on it. And it's not a particularly long period of time. I think in the past it was as little as 2 seconds, having that majority of the frame in view, and therefore we can measure that you stopped on it. Now we know that X certainly has much more sophisticated data about this. But again, the user is not their customer. The advertisers are their customers. They don't necessarily share all with their users. And even though I can tell you for a fact that there exists in a database at X, they can tell you exactly how many individual unique people watch that video and for how long, that's going to remain at least somewhat proprietary unless they feel like they have a reason to release that kind of information. But we do know, as marketers, that those metrics mean something. So let's just say, let's play a little game I like to call, let's just say. Let's just say, knowing that there were 200 million stops on that video, full screen view, that they could see what was on the screen and that they stopped on it with intent. Let's say that only 10% of those people actually stayed for any length of time to watch, up to the full length of the video, but certainly at least significant portions of the video. Maybe fast forwarding through it even, but still watching large parts of it with intent. And let's say it's 10%. Folks, that's 20 million people. That is huge. I mean, that's the kind of listenership that Rush Limbaugh, the number one talk radio person in history, that's what he would get as weekly listeners, 20 million. The nightly news broadcast, ABC, NBC, CBS, they get 20 million. That's pretty respectable for an evening news broadcast. Some of them get a little more, some get a little less, but let's call 20 million, pretty consistent as an average amongst them. That's decent numbers for them. And we know, because the numbers came out, and Fox actually had the gall, the unmitigated gall to brag, that they had 12.8 million people watching the debate on Fox News last night. That's 12.8 million, folks. That's pitiful. That's like half of what they got with Trump when he set records for them during the debates in 2016. So they're bragging that they got half. No, they needed Trump and they wanted Trump there, and their ratings suffered by close to half, because probably if Trump had been there, they probably would have beaten those old 2016 records, I would think, given population shifts and everything that's going on right now. I think that they easily could have had 25 to 30 million watch that had he showed up. Don't know, but plausible. And I don't think that it's at all unlikely, again, as a social media digital marketer, to say, very likely, that so far, much less what's to come, because it still exists out there, that a good 20 million people probably have watched this already. And it was a good format. It was a good forum. Now, it's Trump. I am always honest about the guy. So much I love about him. So much of his style of communicating doesn't work for me personally. And I'm honest about that. But I also know that I'm not everybody else. That we all respond differently. Sometimes I wish he was a little bit more articulate and polished about certain things. Sometimes I wish that he didn't allude to, but yet ultimately beat around the bush with certain things. But what I did really take away from it, he was measured, he was sober in his tone, but also yet very relaxed. I think given everything that's being thrown at him, I don't know people half his age who could withstand what he has had thrown at him. And there is a certain inner peace, whether it is from his spirituality or religion or just personal confidence, his constitution, whatever you want to ascribe it to, there is a serenity in the man that very few could match, and that you certainly can't fake it. You just can't fake it with all the stress and the pressures that he has thrown at him, given the potential, at least on paper, of centuries in prison, dying in prison. And the fact that, as Tucker brought up, aren't you afraid that given the escalation from Russia Gate and the attempt to keep you from taking office in 2016 to trying to get you removed from office through Mueller and 2 impeachments, and now 4 indictments that are only making his popularity go up, at what point aren't you afraid they're just going to kill you? And why wouldn't they? And he sidestepped the question a bit, which is understandable. Talking about your own mortality, I expected Tucker to ask it in a direct way, and I expected Trump to handle it in an indirect way. And he did. But you still walk away with the sense that he knows the stakes of this, and that he still does it willingly because he believes in it. Which at the end of the night, for me, left me walking away from listening to it with a really hopeful sense. Just this innate, hey, I think some way, somehow, this is all going to be okay. That's leadership, and you could probably find all the dictionary definitions that you want to. I can't think of a better singular example of leadership than being in that level of crisis and making your supporters feel like, I get it. I know that these are dire times and the challenge ahead, but I'm willing to face it because I feel you with me. And he talked about that, feeling the love from his supporters. So it left me feeling very hopeful. Going to talk a little bit more about that when we come back, but I do need to take one last break for the hour here. So hang with me, and we'll be back in just a moment. All right, let's slide into the last segment here. Appreciate you listening. And so let me, be frank about some of this too. So Tucker did bring up the concept of violence, of civil war. And Trump, in some ways, at first sidestepped that a little bit. But then, he acknowledged that even in his own supporters, he sees this level of love and support that's unmatched, but also the intense anger that people feel about what's happening to their country. And how that is potentially a very volatile combination. And he's right. I mean, it is. I mean, when you look at what they are doing, a revolution happening in our midst with unprecedented actions taken by very politicized office holders who are working in coordination at the federal, state, and local level to imprison dissenters. If you look at this decade, the 2020s, A century ago we had the roaring 20s. They were really good times, and it just seems like a century later we're destined to do the opposite. The declining 20s, the whimpering 20s. And here we are with that. And so again, it makes me understand that Trump understands some broader stakes around this, but I also get the sense too, maybe there's a lot of him that I think maybe tied his hands in his first term, that he doesn't want the entirety of the bureaucratic state to mutiny against him. That he would rather it be some bad players that you can kind of pluck out of there and then just kind of, patch things up and go forward. Whereas I'm definitely of the opinion some institutions, there is no surgical removal of pieces and then patchworking them back together. You would just get a Frankenstein's monster. The FBI in its current form gots to go. It is untenable. It is at odds with the concept of liberty as designed in our Constitution. They've been proving it over and over and over since their inception, really. But then you have the last 20 years, and exemplified by the other GOPers, the debate stage last night, talking about their views of foreign policy and everything, and decrying these people like Ramaswamy for not having experience. What has been so good about the experience that we have? If you've been doing something 20 years or 40 years or more, but you're bad at it, why does that earn you any particular credit? And the FBI isn't particularly good at stopping crime. It is particularly good at targeting political dissidents. I want no more of it. Trump talked a little bit about DOJ Inspector General Horowitz and complimented the guy. As I've said for a long time, that guy's cleanup crew. He puts out reports that say agreeable things, but which ultimately undermine the case for prosecution. He is the Inspector General that wrote the report on Comey's dismissal of Clinton's emails and that whole scandal. And he correctly pointed out that Comey did wrong by institutional procedure, but at the same time wouldn't ascribe any kind of maliciousness to the motives, and ultimately undermined any case to go after Comey and prosecute. Did the same with people like Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. So I'm not a Horowitz fan. It bothered me to hear Trump compliment I.G. Horowitz. I will admit that. There's a difference between I'm going to keep my powder dry and maybe not say too much, which I could have understood, but going out of his way to compliment a guy that I think is basically institutional cleanup crew to throw the people a little bit of red meat. It's kind of the old Janet Reno thing after Waco, where she's like, I take complete responsibility. But it didn't mean anything because she knew that nothing would happen to her. What this means is the buck stops with me, so don't prosecute anybody below me. But I also understand that I'm at a high enough level, I'm big enough that you won't come after me. And that same kind of cleanup crew, give the public something that acknowledges their distrust and displeasure and anger with something that's happened, short of actually ever holding any individual in the government accountable for what they did. Absolutely disgusted by that. But I look around, on the whole, nobody's made a better case than Trump. So it comes back to, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to tell you things I love about Trump. I'm going to tell you things that frustrate me sometimes. I'm okay with that. At the end of the day, Trump didn't lose any of his support either last night. He probably grew it if people listen to what he said and understand it. Again, the sincere understanding of the stakes and willingness to put himself in front of the fire for his supporters, I think that will continue to carry him and serve him well, as it should. In the meantime, we'll just have to look forward to what happens over the fall because, again, there are some plays and change. But Trump will be the nominee, and DeSantis won't. Those other people on the stage aren't even going to be cabinet-level people. Ramaswamy may be somebody in the future. Don't know what, but time will tell. The rest of it comes down to what the state is willing to do to keep Trump out of office, and we have to take that a day at a time. Now, we're going to talk about this more once we hear more what Trump has to say coming out of Fulton County. Here's something, I'm just going to plant a seed. We'll talk about it more in the future. It's more likely in my mind that they would kill the guy than ever put him in prison. Why? He was the leader of the free world. He knows a lot of stuff. You don't put somebody with presidential kind of knowledge in a prison, even a low security country club kind of prison. You just don't do it. It would be a national security risk to the United States of America to have any president sitting in a prison. So what their plans ultimately are, once they realize that this legal warfare against him won't scare him away, who knows what they'll do. But we're going to be watching, and we'll listen to what he says coming out of tonight. In the meantime, I appreciate you listening to Command Briefing. This is Jared A. Chambers. See me on Twitter /X at C4CEO. And we'll be coming at you again soon with more.